The first series vaccine in this film is 3 early 2 lockdown other service by selling sales. Like so, let's get into this film in 3, 2, 1.
I was in my second year of high school. Every year, our school was required to perform at least 2 lockdown drills, but our principal at the time would always have us do more like 3 or 4, so I was pretty used to it. All of the teachers would always warn us ahead of time to save any panic. That morning, as I walked into my first period class, I was informed by my history teacher that the school would be having a lockdown drill that day.
Yeah.
I actually kind of liked them, because it meant we'd have less work to do considering the 20 or 25 minutes they always take.
Yeah.
30 minutes into class and a short buzzer went off, followed by our principal's voice on the intercom. Like every other drill, he explained how the school was going into lockdown, but that it was just a practice drill. He explained that should there ever be a real lockdown, the buzzer would sound for longer, and there would be no intercom announcement. Our teacher instructed all of us to shut the curtains and go into the corner of the classroom that was not visible from the outside door. He then shut off the lights and locked the door. For the next few minutes, we sat in silence. Eventually, we heard footsteps outside. It was the principal trying every classroom door to make sure they were locked and that the classes were responding to the lockdown correctly. Before I knew it, the drill was over. The day progressed and I was now sitting in my physics class, which was right after lunch. At some point, I ducked out of the class to use the bathroom.
What's up, Daniel Burry's Sports Atlas? What's up?
Now, our school building had a basement. Down there, they had a bathroom that was much more private and a lot less busy, so I would always try to use that one. There were a couple classrooms down there, so it didn't look weird for me to go down there.
Yeah.
I was sitting in one of the back stalls. I was the only one in there, which was usually the case. All of a sudden, I heard the lockdown buzzer start going off from outside in the hall. It sounded for about a full minute before it abruptly stopped. I waited for the principal's voice to come over the speakers, but it never did. Which, like I mentioned earlier, was supposed to signify a real lockdown. At first, I didn't really think it was a real lockdown, though.
Yep.
It happened too close to the practice lockdown earlier that morning. I thought it was just a second part to the drill. But as I sat there for a few more minutes, I started to realize that if that were the case, that probably would have been explained over the intercom. I started to panic, now thinking this was real. I wasn't safe in the bathroom. The door had no lock, so I ran outside to try and find a classroom. There wasn't much for options in that basement. It was also hard to see now that they turned the hall lights off. But I did eventually find a classroom door. I tried the handle. It was locked. I looked in through the glass part of the door. In one of the corners, I could barely make out a kid hiding. There was a class inside. I banged on the door, explaining that I was a student and trying to hide. I got no response. I was both terrified and frustrated at the same time. I realized protocol was to never let anyone inside no matter what. I was on my own. I thought about going back to the bathroom, but found an empty computer lab first and settled on that. I got under one of the back desks, and for the second time that day sat in silence. Only this time for a real lockdown. 10 minutes.
What's up, Deputy Sorting? What's up?
Minutes went by. Nothing. Not even an update over the intercom. Then, the hard-dropping sound of running footsteps from outside coming down the basement stairs.
What?
I could hear the person's heavy breathing.
First of all, why is there no lights on the bathroom stall? That's not good. What if somebody walks in while you using the bathroom?
It kept getting closer. It now sounded like it was just outside the room. I started adjusting my body position to try and duck down more to get further out of view, when a light turned on. It was the light to the computer on the desk above me waking up. I must have accidentally pulled the mouse cord. It wasn't that bright, but it was enough for me to make out a silhouette in the doorway to the room.
What?
I genuinely feared for my life in that moment. The person was just standing there. I prayed they wouldn't enter the room, and after what felt like an eternity, they turned and continued running down the hallway. A few minutes later, and the lockdown was over. The school tried to keep the incident silent, but it eventually got out. Apparently, a kid in my grade that I actually slightly knew stole his dad's gun and got into school through a back door he left propped open earlier in the day. Police showed up to the school and detained him before any bullets were shot.
Wow, there you go.
They later searched his backpack and found a paper with a list of names on it, which they believe was who he meant to kill that day.
What?
Pictures of the list itself leaked. My name.
Yeah, at least you were going to. What?
Name was number 4 on that list. I never heard if the kid just got scared and decided not to do anything, or if he just genuinely didn't find anybody after entering the building. Either way, I believe the person that I saw while hiding in the computer lab was him, and that I could have lost my life in that moment.
Yeah.
Back in October of 2016, for whatever reason, these killer clown sightings kept getting reported around America. Real or fake, videos of them would almost always get posted somewhere online. For that whole month, it was all over the news. I remember in our town specifically, it kinda got out of hand. People in the area were committing real crimes wearing clown masks, or sometimes full-body clown outfits.
What?
It was honestly terrifying. Anyway, back when this was happening, I was in high school. Throughout that whole month, many of the staff and student school emails received threats. They were always from a different random email address, so there was no real way of blocking them.
Yeah.
It was always something like killerclown@cvx.zy or something random. It usually had something to the effect of killer clown followed by some random characters.
Yeah.
It got so bad that the school had to send out a mass email to all students and parents saying they were aware of the threats and were taking them seriously. I remember some days the teachers were instructed to teach with their classroom doors locked. We weren't even allowed to leave to go to the bathroom. Needless to say, a lot of us were on edge. I have no shame in saying it was really scary. I saw some of the things the emails were saying. A lot of it was really graphic and truly disturbing. Of course, at the time, none of us knew if anyone was really planning to act on these threats, or if it was just someone somewhere behind a computer screen playing a sick joke. But honestly, it felt like only a matter of time before something would go down.
Yeah.
And finally, one day something would. I was in my trigonometry class when the school's lockdown alarm went off. Our principal's voice then came over the loudspeaker. His voice was shaky. Now, our principal was a pretty intimidating dude.
Yeah.
Hearing fear in his voice only furthered my own fear. I knew this lockdown had to be related to the threats. In that classroom, there wasn't really a good corner for all of us to hide in. You could see a good portion of the room from outside the door. So our teacher ordered us to barricade the door with all the desks and chairs in the room. We then sat as far away from the door as we could. Although
that's a theory of a Wimby K book.
even this provided a clear view of the glass window on the door. I watched as all the lights abruptly turned off in the hallway, shortly followed by the lights in the classroom. The familiar hum of the heating system faded. The school had cut the power. It was eerie. The whole building was quiet, and there wasn't the usual whispering or joking around from other students like there was during practice drills for this kind of thing. Even Our teacher had a look of fear on his face, putting me more on edge. We sat there for multiple minutes. We then heard a metal banging sound, like someone was hitting the lockers down the hall.
Oh.
A voice started yelling.
What?
One of the girls sitting next to me quietly began crying. The noises continued off and on for the next few minutes. As time passed, the noises kept getting louder, as whoever was making them seemingly kept getting closer. At this point, my classmates and I were staring at each other, all of us gauging each other's reactions. Then, the sound of the classroom's door handle rattling. I looked up. Through the glass on the door, I saw a clown mask looking in. The person stood there for a while, not doing anything. Then they abruptly ducked down out of view, and the sound of the door handle rattling continued. They were trying to pick the lock. We all sat there listening to this happen, when the lock disengaged. Immediately, the full body force of this person smashed into the door. The desks barricading the door slightly shifted back. This happened a few more times, but not much progress was made. They eventually gave up, and we could hear their footsteps running away down the hall.
Cool. Oh,
Police arrived, they cleared the building, and escorted all of us out. No one was ever found responsible for the lockdown.
Wow,
It's believed at least 3 people dressed in clown costumes entered the back entrance of the school that day, intent on making true to the threats sent over email.
Wow.
At the time, the school did have some cameras, but during the lockdown they cut the power, so they never caught anything.
Wow.
School was canceled for the next few days. When we came back, the school had installed a new auto-locking feature on the doors and windows.
Wow.
This happened in 2013. I had graduated college the year prior with a degree in education. I wanted to be a teacher and was able to land a job at a nearby high school. The first few weeks, I was shadowing another teacher, as they called it. It was meant to help me prepare to teach my own class, but it really just felt like a glorified TA position. I'd sit in the class with the other students and help the teacher when needed. It was a chemistry class, and on one of the lab days, we required those flasks used for chemical reactions, measuring solutions, and stuff like that. All of that type of stuff was kept in a supply closet on the other side of the building. I made my way out of the class and started heading over there. After 2 minutes, I was there and began looking for the flasks. All of a sudden, my phone went off. It was an automatic text message from the school. Being a part of the staff, we were required to sign up to receive these automated messages.
Yeah.
The text explained how the school was going into lockdown and that it was not a drill.
What?
By the time I would have made it back to my class, the door would have likely already been locked, so I opted to hide in the closet by myself. I turned off the light and closed the door. There wasn't much room to sit down. I had to just stand there in the dark. After a few seconds, the lockdown alarm sounded from the speakers throughout the building. The usual ambience from inside nearby classrooms immediately died down. It was now completely quiet. Breaking the silence was the sound of my phone going off again. It was an update. It read, "Please remain in lockdown. A suspected armed intruder has entered the building.
What?
Police have been notified." I could feel my heart picking up speed. I didn't feel safe where I was. Suddenly, I heard running footsteps in the hall. They ran right up to the closet door and stopped. The doorknob turned and the door opened. It all happened before I even had time to react. Standing outside was an older man in maybe his 50s.
Yeah.
He was wearing a regular t-shirt with jeans. I'd never seen the man before. He asked if he could hide in here with me, and feeling bad for the guy, I said yes. There wasn't much room at all, but we both still fit. The man explained how he had been teaching a class down the hall when he heard the lockdown alarm. In my mind, this raised a red flag. Why then was he here instead of with his class?
Yeah.
I asked him this. He didn't immediately respond. Interrupting the silence was again the sound of my phone. It was another update from the school. The text said to not open our classroom doors for any reason, and that the suspect was believed to be an older man with a beard. I frantically reread the words on my screen. I didn't get the best look at this guy, but from what I did see, he fit that description.
Oh!
I could now distinctly hear my heart beating out of my chest. I made a split-second decision. I opened up the closet door and ran. I went straight to the nearest exit and out to my car in the parking lot. When I got there, I looked back behind me. I didn't see anything. I don't think the man followed me, or at least he didn't follow me outside. From there, I got in my car and left. I'd say around 25 minutes later, I received a final update text explaining that the police had cleared the building and the lockdown was over. I later learned the man had gotten inside by convincing the front desk that he was there to pick up his kid,
Oh!
but that a lockdown was called when they saw a gun holster around his waist as he was walking down the hall. Several teachers reported their classroom doors being forcefully struck during the lockdown from someone trying to open them. The man was gone when police arrived, and they were never able to identify him. He was caught on the school's security cameras, but they never showed a full view of his face. However, they did show that he was indeed armed. I saw the videos myself, and I'm almost sure it was the same man hiding with me, but it was also dark in that closet, so I can't be certain.
Wow. Wow. This is a 3 allergy food tube order service by silenciers. Let's get into the savvy vaccine in 3, 2, 1.
Throughout my time in middle school, I went on a lot of different field trips. My school kind of believed in the idea that field trips hold a lot of educational value, and that's something I would definitely agree with. We went to a lot of different places, but no matter what, at least once every year our class would go to the zoo. I was in 7th.
Yeah, I remember with the free trips to the zoo. The zoo was a good place to visit. Yeah. But the only problem with the zoo is a long walk. Yeah.
grade. It was near the end of the school year, and this is the day our school was scheduled to take that trip. Now, we didn't live near a big city, so we weren't able to go to some big city zoo. Rather, we went to this smaller, but still decently sized zoo surrounded by forest.
Yeah.
It was actually really well known where we lived, so despite its location, it saw a decent amount of business. Nowadays, however, I think the place went out of business, but I could be wrong. Our class had about 40 people. We would all travel in one group and take a predetermined route. But what sucked is, because we had such a big group, we didn't move quick enough to be able to see the whole zoo. To get around this, my friend Carson and I would sneak away from the group and create our own route just for the two of us. Heads were counted at the start of the trip, at lunch, and at the end of the trip. So as long as we made sure to be with the group at those times, we knew no one would notice. Not even 10 minutes after our group set off, and we split away. We explored different parts of the zoo all the way up until lunch. When lunch came, we inserted ourselves back into the group like nothing even happened. It went so smooth, in fact, that we had planned to do the exact same thing after lunch. Even with our pace, there were a few enclosures we didn't get to see yet. One I really wanted to see was the bat enclosure. It was actually probably the enclosure the zoo was most known for. They had this whole cave entrance setup, man-made of course, and inside were the bats themselves. But it was cool because they had to like reverse simulate night and day with the lights, so that way the bats would be awake when the zoo had visitors.
Wow.
This
Cool.
meant that during the day, besides a few dim black lights to let visitors see, it was completely dark. So, once lunch ended, we once again split from the group and this time headed to the bat enclosure. Like how I just described, it was dark. I could tell there were a few other people in there, but not too many. I was physically pointing something out to Carson when I felt someone grab my arm with a good amount of force. I looked over, and it was some guy in one of the zoo employee uniforms. He told me we weren't allowed to touch the glass, something I wasn't actually even doing, and said the two of us would have to follow him. We were, of course, a bit startled. We did not want to get in trouble with the zoo, because we knew that meant we would in turn get in trouble with our school.
Yeah.
So, we followed him. He led us through a few dark passageways, until finally I could see the neon glow from an exit sign. He was taking us outside. He then opened the door, and all the light from outside seeped in. We continued to follow him. We went outside and the door closed behind us. That's when we realized that all that was out there was the forest and an old car parked against the building with nothing but its trunk open. We had no idea what we were doing out here. The guy then turned around and told us to get in. There was no need for him to specify.
Yeah.
There was nothing else for us to get into other than the trunk of this vehicle. That's when we were starting to realize something was definitely wrong. We frantically turned around and tried the door, but it had locked itself when it closed. When we turned back around, we noticed the guy now had a knife and was pointing it in our direction. He started shifting it towards the trunk in such a way like he was telling us to hurry. Carson and I looked at each other, then back at the guy. I yelled out one word, "Run," and we did. We were able to just barely get past the guy. He then ran directly into the forest, where we knew he'd have a tough time chasing us.
Good.
I don't know how long we ran, but it was long enough to lose the guy.
Oh, you
If
lost
we
the guy.
turned right,
Wow.
we would eventually hit a fence to the zoo. So we did, and sure enough, we hit a fence. The two of us jumped it unnoticed, and we're now both back in the zoo. A few minutes later, we found our class and regrouped with them, completely out of breath. Once again, we went unnoticed. Carson and I agreed to keep quiet about the whole thing. It sounds selfish, but at the time, we knew if the school found out about what we went through, they would massively cut down on the amount of field trips offered.
Yeah.
So, we went the rest of the day like nothing even happened. A few days later, I would get a text from Carson. It was a group photo our whole class had taken near the entrance of the zoo just before leaving.
Yeah.
There was a text under it. It read, "Look in the top left corner." I frantically reopened the image. There, standing in the background near the top left corner, was the guy that had tried to kidnap us. Like, it wasn't even a question. That was clearly the same guy. His face wasn't even blurry, and he was looking directly at the camera as the picture was taken. This picture absolutely horrified us. I didn't think the guy was a real employee.
I'll be creeped by
I
too.
kind of just assumed he had somehow stolen the uniform. But seeing this
What?
picture made
He
me
stole
think
the uniform.
otherwise.
What?
At the end of the day, real employee or not, I just hope this guy never got a chance to try and kidnap any other unsuspecting kids.
Oh. Number 2.
I used to live near a couple pretty well-known state parks as a kid. This was back when I was in elementary school, and the elementary school I went to would actually use the parks as field trip material. They would take us out there and teach us about plants, wildlife, just nature-centered stuff like that. If I remember correctly, I was in 1st or 2nd grade when this happened. The school had another one of these state park field trips planned. My whole class rode up on a bus. There were probably about 50 or 60 of us, so definitely not the easiest to keep track of. Regardless, however, the trip was going well. Eventually, it got to around lunchtime. Now, the state park had this playground, just like when you'd see at a regular elementary school.
Yeah.
When we finished our lunch, we were allowed to go and play on it. Being a kid, I of course ate as fast as I could and went to go play.
Yeah.
I remember I was by myself on a swing set that was sort of in a back corner of the playground. Really, I was waiting, because I guess I had finished so quick that there weren't really any other kids to play with yet. I was looking out at the trees, when I noticed an older guy, I would guess early 50s, partly hiding behind a tree looking at me. When he noticed I saw him, he stepped out from behind the tree completely.
Why was he hiding behind a tree looking at? That's a little creepy. Yeah.
jokingly saying something about how I had caught him. He started walking closer towards me, and
What?
that's when I realized he had a camera in his hand.
What?
He started
What?
taking pictures of me.
What?
When I asked what he was doing,
What?
he explained how he worked for a magazine company, and
Really? He taking pictures of you because he works for a messaging company? Okay.
needed new pictures for the front cover. 7 or 8 year old me totally bought it. I mean, I genuinely remember thinking how cool it would be to see myself on the front cover of a magazine.
Yep.
The guy then began asking personal questions, like what my address was,
What?
my parents did for work,
What?
their phone numbers were, and what my social security number was. I couldn't really answer most of his questions, because, I mean, again, I was just a kid.
There's a
I didn't
lot
know
of
what his social security number was. But nonetheless, I answered his questions to the best of my ability. The guy then said he needed to go to his car, because he forgot to grab something. He asked me if I could go with him. I trusted the guy, so I said yes. He grabbed my hand and began leading me in the opposite direction of where the other kids were still eating lunch. He was leading me directly into the forest. I looked behind me and could no longer see the playground, rather just trees all around. I asked him where his car was, and he replied saying it was just up ahead. After a couple more minutes, a parking lot came into view. He continued to lead me to a car in the very back. He opened up the back seat and told me to get in. I looked up at the guy, now confused. I told him that I thought we were just coming back to get something. The guy then sternly repeated himself, this time in a yell. I was completely caught off guard by his sudden change in demeanor.
What?
I was now scared, and so I listened
There's
to
a
him
flat
in
on the
back
plate.
seat.
A flat
He
on the
slammed the door
plate.
in my face and began running around the car to the driver's side door. He got in and started driving. In a shaky voice, I asked him where we were going. We locked eyes for a second in the rearview mirror, but he didn't answer me. He just had this disturbing, extremely focused look on his face. I tried the car door handle, but the child safety lock was on. I noticed we were nearing the exit of the park, and I remember tears beginning to well up in my eyes. This was the most distraught I'd ever been in my life.
I'll be
But
too.
that's when I noticed one of those park ranger pickups pull up behind us. I began frantically flailing my arms through the back window. I really was just doing anything to get the park ranger's attention. The man driving me noticed what I was doing and began shouting at me to get down and lay on the floor. He
What?
pulled a gun out from under his seat and started pointing it back at me.
What?
Naturally,
Yeah,
I
I
did
got you.
exactly what he said,
So,
but the damage had already been done. The park rangers behind us put on their lights and signaled us to pull over. The man did so, but told me to stay where I was and not say a word. Though this effort would be futile. The park rangers had noticed me. The man was handcuffed first and asked questions second. One of the officers then found me and comforted me. When I told him what happened, backup was immediately called to the scene. The man would of course be arrested. I didn't ride home on the bus that day. Instead, my mom would drive over and pick me up. She was as equally angry with me as she was thankful that I made it out okay. She both embraced me and scolded me.
yeah.
It's rare for a day to go by where I don't think about this experience. I was saved from a kidnapping simply because of a right place, right time scenario. Those park rangers don't show up when they did, and I'm as good as gone.
Wow. Number 3.
I took a lot of different art classes in college, and many of them would have a few different field trips scheduled. Usually it was just to an art museum, but some of them were a bit more involved. There was one in particular, I believe it was for this art appreciation class I took. Basically, it was an over-the-weekend thing in a small town a few hours away that I guess you could say was kind of known for its art. We were meant to go around the town learning about a few different predetermined pieces and take pictures to prove we went. So it wasn't really a group thing, just kind of a go and on your own time learn about a few different pieces of art. The whole thing was only for extra credit in the class, but it was a pretty substantial amount. I asked one of my friends in the class, who I'll just call Alex, if she wanted to go with me. She agreed, so we reserved a room at some hotel, and that Friday night we started heading over there. The plan was to get there on Friday night, spend all of Saturday looking at art, and leave on Sunday morning.
Wow, looking out.
When we arrived, we realized just how sketchy the area was.
What?
And I'll just be
That over
straight
here,
up, the motel looked terrible.
Wow.
It was clearly very old. But by that point,
Really-
it was
really
pretty much
old.
too late to look for someplace
Really?
else to stay. We sucked it up and went to our room. The inside wasn't any better. I don't really
What?
know how to describe it. The whole place was just all around sketchy. But, I
Wow.
mean, it would only be 2 nights we'd have to deal with this.
Yeah, only two
We
nuts.
figured we should
Yeah.
probably get up early for tomorrow. So we decided to just go to bed. And that's exactly what we did. Fast forward, I honestly don't really know how long, and I woke up to the room phone ringing. I was confused. It was still dark outside. I picked up the phone and quietly said hello so as to not wake up Alex. There was no response,
What?
but oddly, there was slow breathing.
Oh no!
Clearly,
Oh
someone
no!
was on
Oh
the other
no! No!
line.
No! No! No!
I said
No!
hello a
No!
few more
No! No!
times,
No!
this time a little louder. Though, still, no response, just breathing.
Let's beat it.
Then, something I wasn't expecting. There was suddenly a knock coming from our room's door. But I could hear it through
Nobody
the phone as
here.
well.
Go away
I was on the
now.
phone with was outside
Thank
our
you.
room. That's when the line went dead, and I was once again in complete silence. I sat there in shock for a few seconds. I didn't know what to think of what had just happened. I decided to wake up Alex, who by this point was still asleep. I told her everything, and she confirmed it was definitely weird. We pulled back the blinds a bit, but there was no one out there. Ultimately, we decided that whoever this was had no way of getting in the room, so we both agreed to just go back to sleep and talk to the front desk about it tomorrow morning. Eventually, I did fall back asleep. I know this because at some point I woke back up again. It was still completely dark outside. I was a bit weirded out. Usually, I wake up to some noise, or I wake up because I have to use the bathroom. But this time, nothing. While I was trying to fall back asleep, I noticed this dark figure in the corner of the room. Now, this might sound weird, but my eyes commonly make things up in complete darkness. Like, if I'm in a dark room, I'll usually see things that aren't actually there. Typically, it's things like a coat rack that my eyes see as a person. Just small things like that. I thought that's exactly what was happening now, so I didn't give the figure much attention. But every time I would close my eyes to try and fall asleep, when I would open them, it looked like the figure was closer. It got to the point where it looked like someone was leaning over my bed. But I still thought I was just imagining it. I lifted my arm and was planning on passing it through the figure as a way to prove to my mind that it wasn't real. But as I did so, my arm
can't
hit
be
something.
real.
It was a real person leaning over my bed.
What?
I screamed, and in a matter
be
of
screaming
seconds, the figure turned around,
Really?
opened the door to the
I'll be
room, and was gone.
booking out of the
Alex
motel.
woke up and saw it happen. The both of us were scared out of our minds and
I'll be
completely
too.
out of breath. We shut the door, locked it, and this time barricaded it. We had no idea how this person was able to get into our room. We sat there wide awake until the sun came up. When it did, we immediately left, cutting our trip short. We didn't even talk to the front desk, but on our way back, we did call the police. We would later learn that apparently, when the shift of the person working the front desk had ended, they didn't confirm the next person with the shift had or was even planning on showing up. This left the front desk completely unattended. And that's when some unidentified person walked in and stole multiple customers' personal information.
What?
Which included their room numbers. And, of course, they also managed to get a master set of room keys, allowing them to enter any room. What practices the motel had that allowed something like this to happen is beyond me.
Yeah.
And it's not even like the person is a chance of being identified. The motel is old enough to where there's not even a single camera installed, and no one saw the person's face. All I know is some person who's willing to break into our hotel room has all of our personal information,
Yeah.
and this thought still disturbs me.
Wow. I yeah. I think I'm not doing the swim either. So yeah. So drop a like if you like, and comment down below if you want to see more swims like this one, and subscribe if you're new, and click the bell so you know